Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on in the program, I'm going to be talking with Dave Kopel from the Independence Institute about drug and gun running to Mexico. Now that's fun stuff. But first, buddy of mine from that great station, 850 KOA, he's not a man, he's a loving machine. Michael Brown, thank you for joining us.
Devil's advocate, I love that. It's just sitting here looking at you and seeing devil's advocate and those horns behind you, it's just like, it's perfect.
It's like you're coming home, isn't
exactly.
it? It's like you're coming home. All right, before you became a world-renowned talk show host, taking up my time when there are Rockies games,
right.
You're pimping a great book, Deadly Indifference, The Perfect Political Storm. People know you in other areas as the Undersecretary for Homeland Security. You have 160 disasters under your belt.
Right.
These aren't your old girlfriends. These are natural disasters. These are terrorist acts. And
right.
What was your job?
Well, interestingly, one of the complaints about me was that I used to run the Arabian Horse Association and showed up and ran FEMA the next day. I actually went to the administration after the election of 2000, went to the administration as the general counsel of FEMA and served in that role for about 9 months until 9/11 happened. The president nominated me to be the deputy director of FEMA, and then I later became the director of FEMA and the Undersecretary of Homeland Security.
Yeah, and FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management
Agency, right.
Okay. And so your job, if you put it in a nutshell, your job was when there was a hurricane, when there was a twister, when there was a flood, when there was a terrorist attack even,
right.
You were there to make sure the aid and comfort and whatever needed to get there got there right afterwards.
Right.
Is that a good way to put it?
That's a good way to put it, except I want to bring down expectations a little bit, because to bring aid and comfort, that's really what the locals do. And in our system of federalism, the role of FEMA, as originally envisioned by Jimmy Carter in 1979, was that we would be a coordinating agency. We would make sure that all of the departments and agencies of the federal government did what they were supposed to be doing, and then we would help train and organize state and locals as they responded to a disaster. So we were kind of a coordinating body.
The difference, though, is you're remembered for one thing.
Right.
Katrina.
Yes.
Talk to me before that. Talk to me, what was your role in those 159 other disasters? I don't remember hearing that you did 159 other disasters.
Right, because we did them successfully and quietly and under the radar screen. 9/11 is a great example. That was the first major disaster in the Bush administration. Our job was to bring all of the urban search and rescue teams in. We deployed all of them from around the country, including the one here in Colorado. They deployed to the Pentagon and to Ground Zero. We also coordinated backfilling all the police and fire departments as everybody moved into Lower Manhattan. And then we made certain that in the aftermath of the disaster, Congress appropriated $20 billion, and our job was to make sure that the $20 billion went to appropriately rebuild Lower Manhattan and take care of the government organizations, the public institutions that were damaged or destroyed, that we took care of those. The Columbia Space Shuttle example, the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster is a great example. Here is an agency, NASA, doesn't normally deal with disasters, and suddenly you have the space shuttle breaking apart over the Pacific Ocean and literally spreading debris from California all the way through Texas. And so we stepped in and took NASA by the hand and said, we'll organize all of the, we called it a search and rescue, but we knew there was no rescue to it. We will organize the search for all of the pieces of debris, body parts, whatever we could find. And we did that in about an 8-state area. Anytime there was a major wildfire breakout in Colorado or California, the Mississippi flooding, we were always there to help coordinate the federal government's involvement to whatever extent they needed to be involved.
Let's bring it to Katrina.
Right.
Because this, you will be forever remembered and hooked to Katrina.
Yes.
And I'm trying to figure out how fair that is. I know you're a bad person, just because we're friends.
Yeah.
But professionally, I never thought you were a bad person until I found out that
I was a bad person.
You caused Katrina.
I caused Katrina, right.
Let's talk about how that came about. I remember there was a hurricane. I remember the hurricane came and I thought it went, and then a levee broke. Do I have that?
You get it exactly right.
All right. So everyone was worried. It looked like everything was fine. The wall broke and the flooding happened.
And here's the major blame that I get that I find absolutely incredulous. Why didn't I evacuate the city of New Orleans? I have no authority. The President of the United States has no authority. That is the responsibility of a mayor and a governor under our system of government. Now, there came a point in Katrina, sitting on Air Force One, where I actually recommended to the President that we invoke the Insurrection Act, we waive posse comitatus, and we send troops into New Orleans to take over the police department, fire department, and everything else.
You recommended this?
I actually recommended that because things were so bad. The local and state governments were so dysfunctional in New Orleans, I recommended that we do that.
I don't remember that ever happening in American history.
And it has not happened in American history.
Why didn't George Bush take you up on that?
He did, and then he made what I thought was an amazingly unusual decision for him. And I think it's in hindsight, I understand it, I still think it's unusual. George W. Bush was a governor. He understands, as I do and as I believe, governors are in control of their states. And we should respect that and do everything we can to protect their jurisdiction. So he turned to Kathleen Blanco, the governor at the time, and said, this is the recommendation the staff's given me. I'm going to follow it, but I want you to think about it. And she said, well, give me 24 hours. And she realized that if she allowed this to occur or said she would acquiesce in it, she would write her political death knell. She may have anyway, but she said no, and so the president stepped back, and that's when we
honored the governor.
Honored the governor, and brought in General Honore to start doing the response.
Tell me a little bit about Ray Nagin. Now, from my point of view as a spectator to all this,
yes.
Incompetence doesn't begin to even cover what I see. I saw a goofball. Would that be the right way? I mean,
no, that's very kind of you. I write in the book, which was obviously vetted by the publisher, vetted by our lawyers. I told the truth. When I first landed at the Superdome, landed in a Black Hawk helicopter, a staff member comes running out to me and says, now, you're going to meet the mayor, and we want to prepare you for that. And I'm thinking, prepare me to meet the mayor? I've met thousands of mayors. They said, well, he's kind of in shock or something. We're not really sure. They had helped him. Whenever I would go into a disaster, I would turn to the governors and mayors and say, what do you need? How can I help? They had to sit down with him and help him write out what to tell me to, what to ask me for. I write in the book, John, that my first reaction, I sat down with this man, and in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm dealing with a crackhead.
Really?
Yes. Glazed over eyes, totally disconnected with reality, not a clue. I mean, partially in shock, I get that. But a guy that was just, well, as proven later, he wanted to rebuild the Chocolate City. He wanted to know why these mysterious, unknown quantities of aid were over here and not being distributed to his people. I mean, it was all the most stereotypical garbage you could imagine.
And he's written his own book now.
He's self-published a book, yes.
Self-published
a publisher wouldn't touch it.
And he's got some choice words for you.
Well, he writes in his self-published book that he believed that when I landed in the Black Hawk helicopter, that I was there with the CIA to assassinate him.
And you were, right?
I should have been.
Bring it to your entrance in this. How is it that you are now linked with Katrina? It seems to me that I'm looking at levees that were not properly maintained.
Right.
I don't know if that was a state or a federal or a local issue.
All three of them.
I see a mayor who was incompetent,
right.
who had buses who could have gotten people out,
right.
and he did not.
That's correct.
And I see a president that took a huge PR hit because he was playing golf because he thought the storm had over, like
right.
all of us were.
Right.
What failed, and what did FEMA do wrong or right? Well,
I think first, and from a more strategic point of view, we have allowed expectations to get so high that there are too many people, this dependency culture in this country, that believes the federal government is going to show up when a flood, a tornado helps, and we're going to literally lift your butt out of that storm and save your rear end. And that is not the role of the federal government. It has never been. We will, in dire emergency situations like 9/11, we will, and like in Katrina, we dispatch the urban search and rescue teams. But that's all after the fact.
Then what is the beef against you? What is it that heck of a job, Brownie, now will be part of the lexicon?
In all honesty, it is this. The president and I, when that famous quote was stated on television, he and I had just finished meeting in a green room. Well, it's not really a green room, but a room at this Air National Guard base. And I had been explaining to the president, because it's the first time I'd seen him face to face since the storm had made landfall. And I'm explaining to him, look, boss, this is horrible. Nothing's working. I can't even get the cabinet coordinated at this point. You know, Rumsfeld, who still is a good friend of mine, he's out in California doing something. Condi Rice is in New York shopping. Chertoff's doing something in Atlanta. I don't know. I can't get them to pay attention to what's going on. That's what I'm telling him about how bad it is. And then he walks out when the public is seeing people in the Superdome, they're seeing all these things that the media is saying, look how bad it is, and then he tells me what a great job I'm doing. The media immediately connected that this guy, Brown, is a buddy of the president's. They're in cahoots with each other. The president is disconnected from reality of what's going on. We now have a person and a place in which we, the media, can now attack this administration. Was
Bush indifferent to what was going on? Did he not understand the gravity of the situation?
He didn't. I described it was either Monday or Tuesday after landfall. We had a CIVET, which is a secure conference call, back with the sit room at the White House. And at some point in that, when it first started, there was this, he told the cabinet members and the others, he told everybody literally, shut up, I want to hear what Brown says. Or so I want to hear what Brown said. And I repeated again, Mr. President, it is my belief that 90% of New Orleans is underwater. We've lost this city, and I can't get things to happen. And there was that, you know what seems like 5 minutes, but it's really like 15 seconds of silence where everybody's waiting for him to react. I think he, honest to God, this isn't meant to be critical. I think it's just a fact of life. He thought this was another hurricane. We had just done 4 hurricanes back to back in Florida. We had done all these floods. It's a hurricane. Brown will take care of it. And so he was disconnected from the reality of what was happening on the ground.
If you were to go back into a time machine and get back there, when you got the call and you went there, I'm talking you personally, you can't control what Bush did, you can't control what Nagin did.
Right.
What would you do differently? Anything?
Number one, and this may seem trite to people, but if you understand how important the media and communications is to everything that we do in this world, I would have stood at those typical press conferences where everybody crowds in to get behind the guy talking at the microphone, and I would have said, look, here's what's going on. This is a horrible disaster. Nothing is working the way it should be. I've got all of these materials and supplies lined up. They can't get into the city. The state is dysfunctional. We've lost the police department in New Orleans, which was corrupt anyway. So we had all of these problems. I would have told the American people exactly how bad it was. Instead, what do? You talk about how great everything's going.
What does this tell you about political casualties? What's the big lesson when something goes wrong? And things go wrong in politics.
All the time.
What happens?
Well, someone will be at the tip of the spear, and someone will take that spear, and you might as well just recognize that. And I saw it coming in the middle of the storm. I knew the train wreck was occurring.
In other words, there's going to be a fall guy.
Exactly.
And you're it. Deadly Indifference. Pick it up, Amazon.com. Stay tuned. This is going to be interesting. Michael, thank you.
Thank you, John.